Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ernst Singleton, Dean of the Lubin School of Business. I'd like to welcome you to the Dean's Roundtable. Really pleased to have with us today Richard Ferrari, who is a partner with Big Four accounting firm Ernst Young. He's a member of EY's Financial Services Office, Indirect Tax Practice, which consists of 400 tax professionals. He provides services related to indirect tax, including but not limited to federal and multi-state employment tax matters. Mr. Ferrari has recently led the firm on the technical aspects related to the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP program, supporting his clients to help them understand the rules related to loan origination and loan forgiveness. Most recently, Richard has been speaking about PPP loan forgiveness to clients and industry groups. The International Tax Review World Tax Survey of 3,000 corporations recognized Mr. Ferrari as one of the top 10 US East Coast tax advisors. He lectures across the country on current indirect tax developments for various tax associations, including Wall Street Tax, the Tax Executives Institute, and the Council on State Taxes. Mr. Ferrari received his BS from Fordham University and an MBA in taxation from the Lubin School of Business at Pace University. He's a certified public accountant licensed in New York and is a member of the American Payroll Association and the Institute of Professionals in Taxation. Please welcome Richard Ferrari to the Dean's Roundtable. Mr. Ferrari, if you take a minute to describe your background, please. And
sure.
welcome.
Thank you, Dean, and it's an honor and privilege to be with everyone today. A little bit of my background and, my fond memories with Pace and the Lubin School of Business is that I sort of came out of Fordham in 1991, which at that time was a little bit of a tighter job market. And I do remember this vividly, as I said to my parents, I'm going to pursue, and I'd like to pursue my MBA, and I'd like to specialize in taxation. And it was a couple core courses that I took that I really found that I had that natural knack for the logic of the way the tax code was written, and the factual aspects, as well as the mathematics around it. And with that, I applied and secured that opportunity. And it was early summer that I was going to start engaging in summer courses, and it was not even within a week of applying for my summer curriculum that the Pace School helped me find my first co-op program. And I just found that to be extremely amazing. They helped me secure a co-op program at what used to be a company called General Signal Corporation. It was a conglomerate. And I'll set this foundation for today because it was really interesting. Is I was the intern that ran the actual corporate tax consolidated technology. So if you think back 30 years ago, the technology was based on a program that's around today called Corp Tax. And I was effectively consolidating the 30 different or 35 different subsidiaries and rolling it up. And it used to take 12 hours from when you pressed go on the system to consolidate all the numbers, which doesn't take 12 hours today. But it was interesting that it was my first foray into technology and transformation and how to use that to really consolidate data and to really streamline a processes. So I'll stop there for a moment, but what I do look back on at Pace was not just the curriculum, but that opportunity and it afforded me my first co-op program, which really set the foundation and stage for my first job offer out of Pace University.
Great. Thank you for that overview. I really appreciate that. We'd now like to open the floor up for questions. You can simply unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat, and Ileana will be minding the chat. Excuse me, while the questions come, let me just start with one. Mm-hmm. What is it that drew you into accounting in the first place? I mean, you mentioned some things about it. You like the math, you like the logic behind it, those kind of things. I'm a CPA as well, and I think accounting is really interesting, but not everybody feels that way. So what was it that attracted you to the field?
I think it was, so fundamentally, I have 3 older brothers. They're all entrepreneurs. I was the first one to sort of, gravitate or navigate to the academic world through college and postgraduate, the MBA. I think accounting was just the overall logic for understanding the rules around, if you will, profit and loss, financial statements, auditing, things of that nature. And then when I got to tax, I really liked the aspects of the tax code itself and all the logic and all the personas, which I will try to bring full circle as it relates to one of the experiences I've had over the past 18 months. But, in taking the curriculum at Pace, in various tax courses, or even the practice and procedures courses that they had in taxation, you learn about all the different corporate personas, whether it's partnerships, sole props, corporations, S corps, and all that. At the time you're studying it and you're like, when am I going to use all this? When is it going to come to bear? And then when you join a big accounting firm, you're sort of in that corporate environment, in that corporate entity realm. And really the opportunity to sort of use all that. And the recall of that was key around my past 18 months on the Paycheck Protection Program, because it all came to bear. But I would say what drew me to that was just the logic of accounting and just the interpretation of it for me really made sense as the way the thinker I was. And then again, tax just turbocharged it, because that really drew my interest as to knowing something unique. And I was always brought up to really specialize. So you'll notice on my resume, I specialized in what's called federal, state, and local employment taxes, which there are about in the country, about, not even 15 practitioners across the big four. I have a practice of 50 practitioners, but when you think of the 15 that really get themselves to a level that really know all of the facets of federal, state, and local employment taxes. So that was one area that I specialized in. And it really came to bear because the corporations had a distinct need for it, and it was a niche-based item, which I had that opportunity and skill to hone.
Excellent. Yeah. Could you talk a little more about the Paycheck Protection Plan? We hear about it, read about it a lot in the press, but I'm sure it's complicated. But talk a little about some of the issues that you deal with and how you add value. Yeah.
No, I'll bring it home for everybody. It was like 7:15 in the morning when we have as a partner in the firm, we all have reporting partners that we report up to. So the lead partner that heads up our whole financial services office was texting me a message and said, "Hey, can you unpack, the Paycheck Protection Program on the CARES Act?" Now, the CARES Act was hundreds of pages deep. And I happened to be on a different chapter of the CARES Act relating to the employee retention credit. So while I was studying that, I was unbeknownst to me that there was this whole front end around the Paycheck Protection Program. And I received a text and email at 7:15, and then I received another one at 8, and then one of the partners that I work closely with at 8:30, and they're like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm only like 5 pages into the the code of this law." But effectively, it was the first time that, if you think about everything you build up in your career and all the skills, that legislation was passed to really procure and underwrite loans to our small businesses based on payroll factors. It's really never been done. When you underwrite a loan, you're looking at income, you're looking at risk, you're looking at an individual's balance sheet, you're looking at their credit scores. This was completely different. This was, we're giving loans based on the type of entity, as well as the number of employees, as well as their overall historical payroll and gross payroll for the past year. No bank knew how to do this. Nobody, for the first time. And being in the financial services sector of EY, we have a core competency, and we have core relationships with all the banks, and we became an immediate resource. So almost to the point that one of our largest banks called us, and starting on Easter Sunday, we stood up what's called a bat line. And my whole team was on calls 18 hours a day, procuring and supporting the underwriting of these loans. The goal was to expedite the generation of the loans, which you saw on the news happening very quickly. And the loans made their way all the way up to $10 million. Across all types of legal entities. And then there was a backside. So the CARES Act had how to procure a loan, and then the backside was how to forgive a loan. Well, you saw a lot of iterations of that coming out of Treasury. So keeping in track as to what the Small Business Administration was, if you will, documenting as new or promulgating as new procedures. And they kept refining their advice around those procedures, as well as new legislation. to make the paycheck protection a little bit more, much more easier or palatable to certain levels of companies. But we became, our whole team as a firm, we came together to support not just the banks, but truly the small businesses. And I think everybody on the phone may have a family member, a neighbor that's in a small business. And this was the time for all of us to rally around the need and the ask. To myself, I helped one of my brothers who has a couple small businesses. And it was interesting. Small business owners didn't even know how to go through the process with the banks. And we were helping them. We did a lot of thought leadership. We worked with a number of banks, and I've got a lot of good, stories as to the challenges we faced during that time. But it was a great experience, and I think it leads you as you go through your career. It was the one time I would have never forecasted that all my experience at one point would be pivotal to an act that came out during a pandemic state. It was really an amazing time.
I'm sure, yeah. Again, I want to encourage people to ask your own questions. So I'll keep going. A lot of things I want to ask you about. What does it take to have a loan forgiven under the PPP program? Is it a number of employees? What is it that determines whether you have to pay back or not?
No, I won't get too technical on you, but there were multiple provisions that were written in relation to loan forgiveness. And then they sort of ease some of those provisions in relation to like the thresholds of $50,000, a loan up to $50,000, a loan up to $150,000, and loans greater. And then there were multiple legal or affiliated entities that secured multiple loans. But effectively, the goal of the Paycheck Protection Program was to allow the funds to keep everybody on the payroll and pay them. So the most fundamental statement that many of our clients was able to procure was their ADP report that showed that they had 50 employees, they retained 50 employees, and that they paid them all, and that they used that level of funds, call it $500,000 in funding, to actually remit and pay the payroll. So the documentation that they were giving was exactly that, those ADP reports that showed the 50 people that were being employed. Now, a lot of things came out. There was issues that if you didn't pay those folks as much as they should have gotten, your loan forgiveness was reduced. So if you didn't keep the same commensurate salary level, your loan could have been reduced. In addition, if you were, reduced your workforce, absent folks that were retired or, went on leave or, basically were terminated for cause, if you only decided to pay half your workforce, that could have reduced your overall forgiveness. And then lastly, besides payroll, you had to use 60% or more of it for payroll. The other, 40% you could have used for other disciplines, like mortgage interest or rent or utilities. And then they broadened some of those pursuant to the Appropriations Act, where you could actually broaden it for like, protection to run your restaurants. So all of the building and construction that we see in New York for those outside restaurants. So some of that was all eligible for forgiveness, so the way the funds were used. But most importantly, it was the type of legal entity you were. If you were a sole proprietor with a Schedule C and that's all you had, you basically originated the loan on the same document, and then you were forgiven on the exact same document. So it was pretty easy. But the larger clients really had to show a lot of information. And my whole team, we work with a really unique white glove bank that we're helping. They've procured over 10,000 loans, and we've reviewed all of them for them. And the loans right now, we're in the first stage of the last batch of 100 loans, which are the hardest. I never thought they'd be the hardest, but they are. They're all the folks that are coming at the end with a shoebox of receipts, trying to put everything in to get forgiven. And they're the hardest reviews that we have. The banks had to have an air quotes, a reasonable review to give forgiveness. And that's why the SBA sort of created some tranches to make it easier for the big banks, where a lot of their loans were below 50,000, to have an attestation and to sign off. But the ones that are greater than 150,000 require more detailed review. So it was a process, and the banks didn't understand all this either. And then that's where we sort of came in and came to bear to help them with the procedures.
Very interesting.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I apologize if you already addressed it, but what are hot tax topics that have surfaced since the pandemic Are there any interesting changes in tax law due to COVID?
There was a number of things due to COVID. I would say this Paycheck Protection Program was probably one of the most extreme with respect to cash flow, and you might have seen that. And that was, the fact that we were in an environment where folks were securing funding and securing their Paycheck Protection Program, and it was not being imputed in income. And then you were also eligible for all the deductions that were forgivable expenses. So it was almost like a double dip, if you will, in the realm of the CARES Act. And then secondly, the employee retention credit was another, that was a payroll tax credit, not a federal tax credit, that was also eligible. And when the CARES Act initially came out, you had to pick one or the other. You were saying either say, I'm going to go for the PPP loan, or I'm going to go for the employee retention credit. And the credit was typically like $5,000 for 2020 and $7,000 per quarter for 2021. And it really culminated to a nice amount of funding back for an employer. And the Appropriations Act allowed for both of those. So they really broadened the interpretation to basically, be able to pursue both avenues. And the idea was to keep America employed. So whichever avenue worked best. But that's what we saw coming out. Those are the two hottest topics coming out of the CARES Act from a standpoint of the federal tax, specifically the ones that I had a lens into. But now we're all watching, the new legislation from the Biden administration around what's going to happen with the overall tax code, the tax rate itself. And we're all keeping a keen watch on that. I actually have a training on that in the next few days as to what happens and what are we synthesizing as a firm. And that actually brings me back to one of the dean's questions is like, when you're in the accounting world or you navigate or gravitate to the tax realm, everything's always changing. So you do get some consistency. Typically every 3 or 4 years, you see a change in the tax code, and that keeps you sharp and it keeps you relevant and it keeps you, front and center with your clients, and you just watch it evolve. So I think that's been very much the interest as you build your career, you're always building on some of that foundational knowledge and then tweaking it as to what's come out us in the past year as new relevant, tax opportunities.
I am starting to get questions in the chat. I would like to also encourage students to raise your hand if you'd like to ask it yourselves, or you can send it to Anna, or you can send it to me in the chat and we can ask for you. But on the next question, I have heard you reference studying as it relates to new codes or laws. How much of your time is dedicated to studying individually versus working collaboratively with a team?
That's a great question. I would say that, so the CARES Act was probably some of the most significant legislation that we've seen come down. And I think there was numerous pages. And I will tell you that it was not without a team around me that we really synthesized what they were trying to legislate and what the interpretation was. So yes, I read it on my own. But as a firm, I think one of the greatest things about the firm I'm with and EY is the ability to collaborate. And we did just that. I had a team of about 12 of us deciphering the CARES Act and those aspects of the code, whether it was the employee retention credit or whether it was the PPP or other facets. And we did that as a team. And we were able to compare notes. We were able to, secure sessions with the SBA. We were able to look back at and pull some of the specialists, because there were some detailed things that were written that you really had to be a partnership expert or a subchapter C expert, or, be in that realm to understand what they were trying to convey. So we did it as a team. So I would say that with that, I spend, a fair amount of time, studying and understanding the provisions, but most of the time is done in a collaborative nature of like, just the way I remember back to PACE and doing things in a team orientation so that we're all coming with the same output and we're doing it as a team.
Next question. Can you describe the members / level of responsibilities in your team? Do teams change frequently within the Big Four firms? And is it largely based on the specific assigned project?
Right. All great questions. So the one philosophical theme that I have for the way we run our team, and it's our financial services indirect team is, as I always say, it's flat. While there's levels of professionals, if you will, seniors, senior associates, managers, senior managers, we have what's called managing directors and partners. We do that really to facilitate and action, the progress of our whole entire practice and our brand out into the marketplace, but not from a standpoint of keeping our team energized. And what I mean by that is that when I think back to the experiences, whether it's a client example that I have after this call, or the Paycheck Protection Program, which was a tremendous initiative, we all rally around the topic and the subject matter, and everybody contributes equally. So there was a senior associate on my team, her name was Jessica, and she literally built all the procedures for many of our clients on the PPP, and she did it so at an extreme level, at an exceptional level. And we all helped, and we all rallied around it. And there'd be calls that were, managing through, the documentation and deliverables, but everyone played a role. And if we all worked together, we found that to be an easier course of action. And I think, again, the roles or the ranks are to help facilitate or enable our team to get things done, whether it's throughout the administration of our firm or with a client. But for the most part, we did everything under a teaming culture, and that really works well. And that's where we've had a lot of success. With respect to the changing team members, I will tell you that this project that I was on, I met over 150 new professionals at EY during that time, to the point that they became very close friends. And that was amazing. So my core team will be of the 20 or 30 people I talk to every day. And then I have a broader team of like 300 to 400 that we all rally around on an annual basis, and we all serve different roles. But then for meeting new folks, it was a great time. I mean, and I think I was, talking to Erica a little bit about this too, is we've been in an environment where everyone's on Zoom. The client that I worked with, I met them and cultivated a rapport completely under Zoom. I've never met them live. So even with the 150 people that I had a chance to work with, it was all collaborating over Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And it was great. It was a great experience. But I would say that you do see folks, if you will, come and go through the firms. We at EY have a term called boomerang. So we feel like we have a great culture, and folks will go out and spread their wings at an opportunity or a client. What's nice is that sometimes you see them back at EY, 5 years later, or 4 years later, or 10 years later. So it's great. And I think with that, I think one thing everyone should take with them is that if you turn to your left and turn to your right, the students that you're sitting with, in the classrooms, you are gonna see them, and you're gonna see them out again in business, or on boards, and or in various social settings, and it's going to be great. And like I reflect back about some of the students that I went to school with, and some of them are serving as CFOs of organizations and clients of mine. So it's really nice to reflect on that. But I would tell you that you're going to have your core group of team members, but then you're going to always have this collaboration and new folks, and to really embrace that, it's probably the best daily learning exercise that you can have.
2 follow-up questions for that.
Mm-hmm.
One being, since you've referenced your time at Pace so frequently, which is fabulous to hear, can you share some, I'm sorry, I lost my place. Some advice for what sort of skill students can build while in classes to prepare for the workforce? Yeah. What can make a student stand out apart from the others?
Yeah, no, great questions. So I think I think back, and then I think of everything that, as I've navigated my own individual career. I think there's a couple elements, and one is this entrepreneurial spirit, which I think, again, our firm embodies. And I think I came from a family of this entrepreneurial spirit, but you see that when folks, in our new, if you will, our new class of associates come in, this energy and appetite to really take on a new topic, to take on a new client engagement, to take on a new work or deliverable, And I would tell you that the mantra that we as a firm and that even myself have been taking on is this, this concept of a growth mindset. And we could get in a mindset that, we love what we're doing, and this is the procedure today, and this is the operating model, and it's working, and it works for me. And trust me, I have been there. And it's when you embrace that opportunity for change, and you embrace that opportunity to transform, and you bring your entrepreneurial self to that equation, and you bring the collegial nature of teaming with everyone, you really get to a more tremendous outcome than you ever could imagine. So in your curriculum and in your activities, I think it's a matter of understanding not just what you're learning academically, but what you're learning. And I looked at some of the curriculum today, around, the data and transformation and aggregating information. All of our individuals are joining the firm with that. It's already in their mindset and it's already in their DNA. And that is tremendous because that's where we are today, and we're not stopping. I will tell you that I emerged from this Paycheck Protection Program, if you will, secondment in the firm. And when I came out, I started engaging in a lot of calls around workplace management, or the future of work, or return to office, or work from anywhere. It seems like there's an acronym for every scenario. And when I looked up, I'm like, nobody had a solution to validate where folks were working. And that's a big issue for tax, and it's a big issue for employers, because the states look for income where individuals are performing their services, and it's a corporate responsibility to report, remit, and withhold. So when I lifted up my head, literally 13 months later, the firm hadn't gotten much farther. And I pulled in our Microsoft advisory team, who I had worked with on the PPP, and said, can you help me with this solution? And the firm rallied around it. And I didn't have the technology wherewithal to come up with the solution, but they did. And I said, this is what I envision. Can you build it? And they built it. And now we're cutting edge as to a firm going out to our clients, and our clients are saying that's exactly what we needed. And that's going to help us solve our tax problems. So my point is that I think just to embrace that growth mindset, embrace that opportunity to take on challenges, embrace something that you might not know, and that's scary, and do it with an energy that, if you team together, you'll find the answer, because the answers are there. And we are continually in this transformational state. And, I've seen it. And that's what I was teeing up as 30 years ago. I was the intern, uploading 35 tax packages and hitting a button and going home and coming back the next day at 7:30 to see if it was done. That's where we are today, but in a much rapid pace. And everybody can taking out of their classes how things can be done better. And I think that has to be the mantra and the culture, because what I'm seeing happen in front of us on a daily basis is our teams are finding better ways of doing things every single day.
My follow-up question had to do with internships. So great segue. Do you think that internships and full-time experiences in this industry are similar? Do you think internships are vastly different than what a student can expect when they become a full-time worker in the industry? Do you have any what to expect tips for students when they enter full-time?
Yeah, I think for me, the internships was really that foray into the corporate environment and understanding, and it was nice. So as I came out of, if you will, that working world of entrepreneurs and came into the corporate setting, just learning all of the aspects of a corporate environment. And there was a lot of folks, I remember back to my internship, that gave me lots of great soundings and were advocates and served as references as I embarked onto the Big Four accounting realm. And it was great. I would say that today's day, the internships are even more turbocharged, if you will. We secure interns for, if you will, 8 to 12 weeks. We have pretty rigorous sessions, and we put a lot of learning around those sessions. So, a lot of our students leave with getting a taste of the culture, getting a taste of the types of work that we do. And it really is a microcosm of social groups, right? So if the folks that join our FSO indirect tax team will get used to a lot of our team members, and it's usually collegial, it's usually a lot of fun. And after that, they really get a taste of what type of environment do they want to be in. And primarily, folks really engage and excel for where they enjoy working, who they enjoy working with. And they really stay with the organization when they know that they can succeed in their own right, in their own career, and as part of a team. So we try to collaborate as more as we can. But I think the internships today are still paramount to your first step or foray into the. And most of the individuals that have been with me for many, many years started as interns, and they could have done 1 or 2 years, and then they migrated into the firm, and they've been with me since. And I think it's great. And then I think they go back to their schools and share the same type, their individual experiences for how it works. And we're also doing it. I do this with an inner city group. It's called the All Stars Network, and it's an inner city youth program. And we bring a number of interns in every summer too, and they're high school students, and it's great watching them. They're like their first time in a work environment, and they're just learning what it's all about. And they come in all dressed up and ready for their day. And it's amazing to see the confidence that when they leave in that summer, the confidence they leave with. And they all individually will do their own stand-up report as to what they've learned and the practice they were in, and they'll share some key points about it. So I would say that happens on all levels.
I have a question that I just thought about as you were talking about bringing in this youth groups and doing that great work. I'm wondering, in your years working in this job, how have the topics of diversity and equity, how have they affected the type of work that you do? I think we as a firm are that's one of our key tenets, is to have an inclusive environment, a diverse environment. And we've been doing that as a practice as a overseeing a practice for years. And we want to keep that, as the opportunity, because it brings in different mindsets, and you need that. And managing to, our diverse team, and one of the individuals in my team who, she was key to standing up this program, this PPP program. She won this year the most coveted award in exceptional client service. Her name is Candy. This was almost her second career with the firm, and she came to us from the Philippines, and she joined us out of school, and she's been working with me. We've been together for 12 years. I'm sure I would say it's the best 12 years. She would say it's probably the worst 12 years, because the relationship we have. But she received the highest accolade in the firm. And I think that she had a mindset for what was coming out of this crazy CARES Act, and she was brilliant. So we try to encourage a diverse workplace, and be inclusive. And I think, the many high school students that join us from the All Stars program come in, and they feel that in our culture. And it's really our opportunity to embrace that, because the future of the entire firm and the future of our whole business world revolves around and involving all of those, the different teams and groups, because it's key. That's what you need to really get, broad perspective.
I have another question. You talked about the boomerang effect. A few weeks ago, there was an article in New York Times that talked about Big Four partners leaving firms, going to federal government agencies, and then coming back to the firms. Mm-hmm. Is this something you have seen often in your experience?
I've seen, so there's varying degrees or elements, right? There's folks that, as more senior partners look to move on, they'll retire and they'll go into corporate, they'll go into industry, they'll go into a government role. We've seen folks come out of Treasury and take on leadership roles at the firm. So they're bringing with them the legislative or regulatory keys and themes, and they help us in a leadership role to navigate certain areas of the firm, or specifically tax or government affairs. So I've seen that. I've seen, folks at a more junior level leave the firm and come back as partners. I haven't as much seen partners leave and then come back as partners. That's typically not a big theme. Usually you'll see that a little bit. That's not usually a big thing, but we do have a lot of, if you will, folks that come in as direct admit partners. But our key tenets of a firm is to really grow the individuals and promote the folks that have worked through the firm as partner, to see them come through and really achieve that, that accolade and that promotion to partner. So that's pretty much the key theme.
What failures have you personally or indirectly seen as a professional in your early years after graduating at Pace that you would advise students to avoid?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would say that, I joined out of my internship and graduating Pace. I joined one of the first accounting firms, and we could say the names. I joined KPMG, and that was, I have to be honest, that was the first 6 months was a struggle for me, because I was acclimating to a very high performing cultural environment that I had to get, a skill set in. And I was like, wow, this, I'm really, this is what they mean about the Big Four. And then they ended up that they paired me up with the highest performing manager in the practice. And I had an opportunity to emulate and to work with him. And lo and behold, it really paid off, and it wore off. So that mentoring and apprenticeship model is paramount in that career experience. And then I watched what was happening to the environment around state and local taxes, and all the firms were really, it was a very competitive space. That specialization really paid off. And I joined, a couple of years later, I joined with a group of folks. I went over to what's called Coopers and Lybrand, which later became PwC. And I worked my way through that cycle up until the point that I was recruited multiple times by EY. And it was only until the third time that I was recruited that I met an up and coming leader of the firm and a partner. And that energy and chemistry hit. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to make this move, this is it. And I made the move to PwC. But I would tell you that what works for one doesn't always work for everyone else. And I think that I watch a lot of folks come in, and it's kind of, I always say it's the turtle and the hare. I see a lot of folks jump around, and they jump for what they perceive to be the next big raise or bump and raise, but they join different cultures. And I would say you have to take inventory in the culture where you are, the folks and individuals you're working with, who you're learning from, and take that into inventory, because I don't necessarily know if the rapid pace that we see talent moving from one firm to another is always paying off. And I think that there needs to be that reflection, because I certainly think when you anchor into an organization that has all of the key cultural philosophies on where you want to be, I think there's a long-term career path, and I think folks can really succeed. And I do applaud. I've had a lot of folks that have moved on. One of the individuals that worked for me for six years ended up going to a cryptocurrency, wealth asset manager, and he really wanted to do that. And I applauded him, and I gave him lots of support and told him that we're going to still be here, and if he wants to come back, and he knows that. But in some instances, if folks are really following their technical passion for what they want to do, you have to applaud that. The mistakes, or I don't call it a mistake, but the things I see where folks are going from one firm to the next firm to the next firm, it's really to take inventory as to what are they really gaining, and is that beneficial or not. The benefit of staying in an organization for a longer period, the friendships, the relationships, the chemistry, the connectivity, and the internal brand that individuals build is sometimes very hard to replicate when you jump around. And that would say, just take inventory, because when you join any career or any job, it becomes your individual brand, and that brand goes a long way. And I would say that building that brand on the types of performance and your production really pays off. So I would say that just to be mindful of that, because I see that a lot.
You mentioned mentoring. Do you currently have mentors that you consult with regularly?
Yes. Yep. I would say that it's great to have, I actually consider mentors going in both, both ways. There's a lot of folks I work with. Like I said, this woman, Candy, she's a senior manager in our team, but there's many times that I will pick up the phone and be like, Candy, I'm going through this, how do you think I should do this? And she will give you soundings. I think what you want from a mentor, no matter if you're looking up to them, if you're looking left to right, no matter what, is that ability for sound, trusted soundings, and to be able to, source that. So there's folks that I have grown up under, watched, the if you will, partners that are now retired that have been great mentors and help you along in your career. And there's a lot of folks that have worked, I say with me, and that I use as a sounding board for how to navigate a situation, or navigate, a decision that I need to make in the business. And I think that that's part of it, is that, you're all looking for your individual career, but a majority of my job is watching out for all the specialty businesses that I support. And I don't always have the answer. And as long as you can say you don't have the answer, but you're seeking it, and you have folks that you trust to help you along, it goes a long way. And I would say the last 18 months on my PPP journey was key, because everybody had a way of rallying around and making sure we got to the right answers. But as for mentors, I would say that there's typically a few key folks that you confide in and work with about your individual career and your next aspirational role. But I would also say it doesn't in any way, shape, or form diminish the folks that work around you all day long that serve and can play that role.
As you spend many hours of the week dedicated to your work, what advice can you share around finding work-life balance?
Yeah, so I have 3 younger children, so I try to balance work-life balance. I could tell you that my kids will come home around 3 o'clock or so, and sometimes it just taking literally that 15 minutes on their math homework is precious time that really doesn't take me away from my work goals at all. And I would say just balancing it you need to find what is the food for your soul around your family and your work-life balance. So whether that's dinner with your family, which I have prided myself on hardly ever missing. Even when I traveled, I would try to get home or call it one night. I would be in a city for one night and get back. Or getting the kids to school, or spending time with my wife, or that date that I said that you have to still book reservations now in New York after post-pandemic state, to have that evening out, to even yesterday to Halloween, which was amazing. And just I'm sure for everyone's purposes, we all dressed up with little boards. We were all apps on a phone. So the common theme was everybody in the neighborhood, they're like, look at that bunch of apps walking around. I was the weather app, and I quizzed everybody to see how many people even knew what the weather app was. But I think work-life balance everyone's got to find that, and I think, managing to what's important in your family is just as important as managing in your career. And please, I think that one of the most important things is that everybody at work knows that, you're not fooling anyone. Everybody at work needs to have that balance. So if you think that you're going to do the 80 hours a week and give up the balance, the people that you all work with, they want the same balance. So, and they all respect that. So I think you have to sort of take that into inventory, is that everyone needs that space, no matter what time of the day it is, as long as you're getting it in.
What do you do when it comes to making an important decision, whether it is personal or for the company? particularly when decision making. What tips would you give to young college students that you learned throughout your career?
Yeah, number one is sleep on it. There's a lot of emails you get during the day. There's some emails that you'd want to respond to really quick that you probably shouldn't. So you should hold those for the day and reflect on them early in the morning. There's decisions that impact the brand, and you need to make sure that that decision you make understands and carries the brand. Every decision that you make needs to lift the brand. And that when I say brand, your individual brand and the brand of the organization you're with. Then I think there's decisions that impact our people, and you need to make sure that that decision is accretive to our goals. Like who you assign to a project, why do you assign them to a project? Are they the right fit? Do they fit the chemistry of a client? And again, are they a good experience for the individual, or is it an experience that that person's had 10 times and they really don't need that? Being mindful of the impact of every decision is key. And then lastly, before you make the decision, survey and find out. Like folks that joined me on this journey over the past 18 months, I'd call them up and I said to one of my guys, Dave, I'm like, Dave, can you help me on this? And he was like, oh, I'd love to. He's like, yeah, I'll take this piece of the project. I'm like, great. So, you know, really survey the folks that are going to be in your decision, because that will make for a sound decision and you'll feel good about it. And I think, and then lastly, and we do this a lot here at the firm, is if you don't know the answer or you don't know how to make the decision, ask for help and raise your hand and collaborate with another individual, even that mentor, and say, this is a tough one. How do I balance this? And what's the right outcome? And I would say lastly, and I think it goes back to, you had a question about diversity inclusion. I used to share an office with a woman, Karen, and it was great. Like there was calls that she would get off and she just didn't know what to do next. And it wasn't like I was listening into the call. I'd be like, but Karen, are you dealing with this? And she's like, yeah. I was like, I would do A, B, C. And she's like, that's a good idea. And she would do the same with me. So I would say every decision isn't knee jerk. Every decision is something that builds on the other. So you have to think about them.
Do you have any networking tips for our students? I'm sure it's been hard for them during the pandemic and everyone's been forced to be online. Do you have any tips on how they can do that even virtually?
Yeah, so I would say this, you know, I'm on this LinkedIn, and that's been a nice avenue, right, to connect with folks. But you know, for the most of the folks that have been joining the practice in this, you know, this Zoom state, I've been asking people to put 10-minute or 15-minute coffee breaks on to meet them. I've just hired a new team, a whole specialized team in San Antonio, 16 professionals that joined us. And I hold a 30-minute call with them to get to know them and to hear them and go around the different pictures as to, you know, funny stories that they had, so I could remember them. But as for the networking, I think LinkedIn is a first good avenue. I think the second is finding that opportunity or those couple 5 minutes to introduce yourself and asking for a call or an invite, and to see, you know, many folks are busy and it's hard to get that, you know, in the social settings where you'd, air quotes, you'd be at a cocktail session, you'd be able to meet people live. I think that's gotten a lot harder. But I would say that LinkedIn has been that immediacy of how to connect with somebody, and then to see who they're connected with and see what kind of posts they have and if you like them or not. And then, you know, an avenue, I think that may have been actually where I've met some of the folks even in the past year and a half, you know, to connect with many new folks. So it's been good.
Did you join any clubs or have any professors that you considered as mentors? Any tips for our freshmen and sophomores as they're trying to navigate the real world?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, it's all according, I'll turn to the dean on this one. I think from a standpoint of the professors, some of them may very much be, you know, professional in nature, and then maybe serving in certain curriculums or night classes. I know a couple of the folks some of my past EY partners were professors and managed certain curriculums in the accounting realm. But I would say that those go a long way in understanding how you're scaling your curriculum, the courses you're taking, how to sort of manage to some experiences, or the types of firms, understanding about the big four firms and the second tier firms, and what you are studying. There's broad-based curriculums. Folks will be in the finance realm or the economics realm, but everything's crossing together nowadays. Our firm is pretty massive. It's not just audit and tax, it's audit, tax, consulting, advisory, and we have subspecialties in every discipline. And it's just managing through the course curriculum and what you're building out, so when you come out you can adapt to the new opportunities and challenges at an organization. But I would say that when I think back of my professors, I do remember some of the PACE professors, and I just loved the ability for them to sort of take a technical concept and apply it to a client scenario and to make it real. And I think that helps a lot. And I think sort of continuing to source those experiences in the classroom so that you really understand like when this would be a reality and when a certain academic element will come into play. And that's what I wanted to bring to a full close, is that I never thought all of the academics on top of scheduling and managing to the CPA exam, you think you sort of close that chapter on the CPA exam, right? But 15 or 20 years later, I'm doing this Paycheck Protection Program, and I had to know every single type of legal entity. And I'm like, oh my God, I was like trying to remember back. It was fun. And you really, and I literally saw almost every type of small business imaginable. So it was really a culmination of all of my academics and my CPA to really put that in full force. But I would say that you want to take the best out of every course and every professor so that you're really getting those scenarios. And I would tell you that when I look back, I look back at all of the relationships I had. I looked back at the individuals that were in my classes that hold roles at clients now. I look back at those relationships. I look back at who's navigated throughout the firms, who's left the firm, and who are close friends. It all comes in circles, and I would just tell you that it all starts, at the college level and the MBA level, and not to take that for granted, because, like I said, the key theme is you will see many of the folks you're sitting with today throughout your career.
I think this may be my final question.
All right.
There is a lot of talk from employers about hiring staff that have strong soft skills. Can you share some insight around that and what you specifically value in an employee?
Yeah, sure. So, before my co-op program, I was a bellman and a doorman at a hotel in Connecticut. So I had to quickly learn how to work with people, and that social aspect of what you do, and how to treat people and work with people, and approach social situations is really key. And it's not absolute in any way. There's roles for every single type of persona, if you will, in our firm and throughout the country, at all of our clients. I would just say the soft skills is just knowing, like I said, you're continually building your brand. So one of the things that I do is a client emails me, right? And I'm like, this one client, Ron, called me or emailed me. I said, Ron, I was like, I got your message. I'm on a webinar. I'll be off in 2 hours. Let me get back to you. That's a soft skill. So the idea is if they don't hear from you, now they're concerned, they're nervous, they don't know if you're going to be responsive versus just responding. There's a lot of things that come into play, and in listening, a soft skill. I don't even know if listening is a soft skill, but it should be, because there's a lot of folks that are on with clients and they don't listen to what the client is trying to achieve. If you do that, that's half the battle. And then knowing and putting yourself in the shoes of the client so that you understand, what am I going to give them back that's going to help them for who they report to, for who needs this answer. So it's really just taking the whole breadth of the aspects of being responsive, being collegial, being social, listening, the responsiveness, making sure you get the right output, the right deliverable. But all of these things you learn. And I would say that some of the folks that have joined my team have had a diverse array of summer jobs, and they're entrepreneurial, and they have what I call this corporate hustle, this ability to really be responsive. And the clients see that and they love it. And I would just tell you that, you could take a lot from every single one of your summer jobs and or weekend jobs, because it really does fall into who you are as a professional when you sort of, enter the corporate realm.
On that question, I think I need to bring this to an end. We're just about out of time. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Ferrari, for spending your time with us. You had a lot to say, a lot to share with our students. We really appreciate it. We have a small token of our appreciation that I'm unfortunately not able to hand you through the camera. So look for it soon in the mail. And I really want to thank you for joining us. You're a great example of a very successful alumnus of the Lubin School. We appreciate you sharing your time.
Yes.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.